I have a policy as procurement
Okay.
that I use only my company paper logo
Okay.
with procurement doctor consulting,
Yeah.
and it's my right. But I can't do that with Google. They will
Right.
say, "Shut up."
Yeah.
Even though I am his customer, he will
Yep.
say, "Shut up." You have to sign in my paper. This is somewhat that way as well. You first, if you have authority, you try to go one way confidentially.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our number one priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the WBS podcast. I'm Sam Gupta, your host and principal consultant at digital transformation consulting firm Elevate IQ. Every company manages thousands of contracts. These contracts could belong to procurement, sales, or HR. But in most cases, the contract management function is part of the procurement team because of the sheer volume of contracts issued and negotiated. If you don't want to spend millions of dollars in back and forth negotiating with lawyers, then you would need a contract playbook that can help define the boilerplate for your contract along with a system to track contract expiry, legal obligations, and commitments. In today's episode, we have our guest Karthik Rama, who shares his insights into contract management processes, nuances, and best practices. He also discusses how contract processes differ across departments, categories, industries, and how a contract playbook can help save with admin efforts. Finally, he discusses different toolsets and frameworks available to streamline contract management processes and where ERP and P2P systems might help. Let me introduce Karthik to you. Karthik Rama is the procurement doctor having an overall experience of over 17 years and a man that has crossed over 35,000 contracts while building procurement teams from the ground up. Karthik is one of the top 50 global thought leaders and influencers in procurement and knows his subject. With that, let's get to the conversation. Hey Karthik, welcome to the show.
Hey Sam, it's a pleasure seeing you and having you as the host of this show. I've been meaning to come on your show for a while, and we've been trying to get along the right dates, right? So it's been a pleasure coming here. Thank you so much.
Yes, it's been so long. I think we have been talking about this show for a long time, and finally it is coming to fruition. So
Mhm.
I am super excited about it. Just to kick things off, do you want to start with your personal story and your current focus, Karthi?
Yeah, so I got a long story, man. A long story of how I started off with procurement in particular. I had this two job opportunities. One was in the finance space, and I was a commerce graduate, so that seemed like the ideal path, right? And then there's another guy who just I was disturbing him, knocking his. I was his neighbor. I used to irritate him every night, so he ended up offering me a job, and he told it's procurement. I told I don't know what the heck is procurement. Let's
Yeah.
give it a shot. I
Yeah.
know finance. That's how it all started, and it was absolutely fun. It was the first job in procurement was so chaotic. It's because I was working with three different category managers, and three of them had three different ways of operating.
Yeah.
And I used to like I had a category manager A. I
Yeah.
used to respond to him like I'm working with category manager B, the
Yeah.
emails or the contracts. So I used to write the wrong language, and I used to get rework or escalations. So there was a lot of opportunity to learn. So that was my first procurement experience, and then I slowly moved into helping organizations set up from ground up
Yeah.
in terms of their service center in India, moving from we helped the state side to help move them from strategic to we took away all the tactical work and they were managing the strategic work. And then I moved into consulting, procurement technology deployment. And again, as always, contracts is subject that's very close to my heart.
Yeah.
Although everyone feels it's very dry, anything to do with legal paperwork and all this, people are like 2 feet away, right? So somehow it helped me throughout my career, and it's been close to 17 years, and I still don't get bored talking about procurement or doing anything in procurement because every client is different. I'll get to learn something new every day. So that's what's keeping me hanging here all the while.
Yeah, some great points, and you are so right. I have spoken to a lot of different procurement folks, and when they started in procurement, they had no idea what they were getting into. So,
Yeah,
procurement overall, I think they need to change, a little bit about the branding so that people are aware of what career path they can have in the procurement. I think in the last 3 or 4 years, things have changed a lot. But overall, I don't know if the graduates, especially the recent graduates, are going to have a lot of background in terms of what procurement is.
absolutely.
So
There
we
are a
are
few people who reached out to me, like the recent graduates now. So it is changing, like you said, but it's still got a long way to go. So it's interesting to see the young kids trying to ask Karthik, how do I get into procurement? Tell me what do I learn and things like that. So there is some kind of change right now.
exactly. So we are going to dig into all of that. We are going to dig into contract management, which for a lot of people, as you correctly pointed out, that it's probably going to be a dry subject. It's music to my ears, to be honest, because that's what I live with. So, okay, so we will get there. But before we do that, we have one of these standard questions for
Mhm.
all of our guests. And that is going to be, Karthi, your perspective on business growth.
My perspective on business growth. So for me, somehow I'm a lot very process oriented guy. Although I work with a lot of technologies, for
Yep.
me, and process again entails into people to some extent, right? People need to follow process,
Yep.
and I feel like somehow everybody thinks of technology to be the silver bullet. You have technology, things will fix, but I think the technology will fail. It's just an extended arm. You need to have a strong business process even if you're a small guy, big guy, the guy in the middle, or whatever it is, you have a nice business process, whether it's Excel sheet, whatever way it is. But if you have a process, you're sticking to it, you have a goal. That's how once you keep repeating that and you keep checking you go back and see after 2 years how you did it. That's how you keep improving incrementally, and that's what is business growth according to me. So once you have a nice standard process, you have a habit, and you keep pushing that with your team, and you keep enhancing it every so often, that's where you can have the true business growth as such.
I completely agree with you. I think the if you really want to grow and scale, you have to start with your standardization, and the standardization start with your processes. They need to be standard. They need to be scalable.
That's right.
So we'll discuss all of that. Now let's go back to your comment related to having these different three different categories and
Mhm.
having different languages overall in those categories. And when you look at the contract management processes, among those three categories, I can almost guarantee that the buying process, the procurement process, as well as the contract process is going to be significantly different because the variables that you need to care for in each of those categories are going to be drastically different. And that's why the subject matter expertise matter a lot when it comes to procurement, right? If you don't understand how to purchase a specific category, it can fire back significantly. So,
Absolutely.
from your experience, let's say if we talk about the contract management and the standardizing of the processes, especially when we look at different categories, and obviously, it's not going to be just the procurement that is going to
Yep.
be relevant from the contract management. It's going to be standardizing the entire contract process. You need to have that centralized the way you are going to have financial control. That's why you need to have the legal control as well. So,
Absolutely.
so from your experience, I don't know if you're going to have any specific story that you might be able to share related to how the contract management space evolves when you look at from the okay. Initially, there are going to be different category managers. They are going to be speaking different languages, but then they all need to come to the same dinner table and they need to speak the same language. So, do you have any specific story with respect to how the process journey looks like when you talk about standardizing the contract management process?
Absolutely. A lot of horror stories, Sam, to
Okay.
be honest. Okay. I'll start off with one very simple one. So before I get into the story, right, I just want to give a little bit background what it
Yeah.
is. So the contracts, as there's either heavy legal involvement or light legal involvement,
Yeah.
depending on what kind of an organization you are. Okay. If you are a guy who's doing research and development. So it's heavy legal because you don't want to mess up something and bring a problem to the society, right? So I used to manage the category of radioactive waste, environmental, water treatment. These were the categories I used to manage. Okay? So because I don't want, I just use a plain, simple, wrong language in a contract. And assign it to the supplier. And the supplier takes the radioactive waste. He just throws it in the nearby dustbin. What's going to happen? The entire society is going to die. And then you have a lawsuit. So that's the kind of, it could be that, or it could be you just buying pencils. Right? So then it's logical that you don't need that much of heavy legal involvement or that much of scrutiny in terms of how do you dispose it or how do you procure it, specific clauses and all that. So that's the basic premise. And this particular organization that I was talking about, the different category management. So no matter what categories it is, or what kind of legal language it is, there is some bit of at least 60-70% you can have it standard, like the extension of an agreement. I'm going to extend the agreement by 3 more years, or it's evergreen, or payment terms. Even this languages, each lawyer has his own little way of writing it.
I agree.
So my name is Karthik. Karthik is my name. So what was happening is I was working with 3 different lawyers. One guy was asking, my name is Karthik. Okay, that's how we call the clause. And the other guy is saying Karthik is my name. And if I did my name is Karthik red, he would have given me a red mark and told that this is wrong.
Interesting.
So to that level, everybody has their own. Every lawyer has their own way of writing. Right? They specifically like their way of the clause. So it was a tremendous effort. And what happened was that organization used to work in silos. Everybody worked in their own departments. So no lawyer didn't know the other guy how he's writing. There was no visibility at all. Maybe that guy did better than me. Right. So I set up an offshore center of excellence, which was helping them. And then me as the single point of contact working with multiple people, I could make out how messed up the process is. It's really not messed up, but it could be done better. So that's where I got a very bad quality score because I kept doing mistakes. I forgot which clause to write for whom. It's too much work for me as well.
Right.
So I kept getting ding, and then I went back to my boss. I told this is the problem. I'm not the problem. This is the problem, and let's start fixing it. And we ended up making this contract playbook. Okay. Lawyers are extremely expensive. Anywhere you go, everybody tries to become a lawyer because they get to earn good money. Right. And the lesser you use them when it's needed. That means it's savings for your organization. So what this playbook does is it's basically taking all the contract clauses, whether it's for radioactive waste or a master service agreement for professional services or software as a service, whatever may be the contract type. And then you push each clause. It was back in the day, 10-15 years ago. So it's not in the system, but today you could do it in the system. You push each clause, you pre-negotiate it with your legal team, saying that if there's a change in this clause, this is the second level. So let's talk about non-confidentiality agreement, right? In confidentiality, it is one-sided, where if you and I get into a contract, I say, I will not I'll not be confidential with your data, but you need to be with mine. That's one-sided, right? Now, there's another one is mutual, where you say, okay, I save you, you save me as well. Right? So these are the 2 variations in it. So what we used to do is in the playbook, first we'll start with, we don't want to take any liability on the confidentiality. It's one-sided. And then the second is the fallback language. So procurement is given an authority to use it without coming to legal. Before they used to go to legal every time. There's a change in the confidentiality that reduces that legal effort. Now, and this could happen with every clause, whether it's all the core legal privacy, indemnity, whatever it is. We could do that, and we kind of made a complete playbook, and this kind of fixed the overall back and forth, the best practices between the lawyer, and we kind of laid a policy around it, and we used to review it every couple of years. And then once we had this nice procurement tool, which they only used the contracts as a repository. Instead of putting the contract in your file cabinet, they put it in the shared drive. They put it in the system, right? And that system had some inbuilt capabilities where I could build these clauses in the system, right? I could have 2 fallback clauses like this. You send a contract, supplier says, okay, Karthik, I don't like your privacy language.
Yeah.
He redlined it.
Yeah.
Now you look at it and you say, okay, let me try this one, which was pre-approved by legal. I'll send it back to the supplier. Supplier says, still I don't like it. Okay. This time when it comes back, when I use the second alternative language, the automated trigger will go out to the supplier. To the legal guy in privacy.
Yeah.
He'll look at the clause. He will say, okay, this is nice. Or Karthik, let us get onto a call with the supplier to negotiate this clause. So that's what today's systems are doing in particular. So this is one of the horror stories, and there are many more. I'm sure they'll come out as we go through this session. But the contract playbook is one of the biggest things, and that's how I learned a lot of the contract as well, because it's clause by clause and everything, because I was building it myself. So that's how I got a nice strong foundation in the beginning of my career.
Yeah, so very interesting. So I'm actually going to have some clarifying questions for you related to whatever you have spoken about so far. So one of the problems or the clarifications that I always need in my mind when I look at the contracts and the function of contract management in any organization. So obviously, as we all know that, even if you are going to be one-man shop, you are probably going to be dealing with a lot of contracts in general. Right? Now, the contracts are going to be all over the place. When you talk about your corporation, you are going to be signing a lot of contracts with your employees, and those are going to be equally impactful in terms of getting the lawsuits. You are going to be signing a lot of contracts with your customers. You are going to be signing the contracts with the suppliers, as you correctly pointed out.
Yep.
But when we look at the contract management function, in fact, I mean, you are calling yourself as the procurement doctor, but we are talking about contract management here. Yeah. So in my experience, contract management is always seen as the function of the procurement. In fact, if you look at some of the procurement software in the market, they always have this contract management piece inbuilt as part of it. So when you look at the contract management lifecycle or the contract management function, is it typically part of the procurement department inside companies, or is it supposed to be slightly more independent and it is supposed to be covering everything related to contract, whether we are talking about sales contracts, employee contracts, or the procurement contracts?
Absolutely. So that's a very nice question. And to a large part of my career, it was majorly held with procurement, the ownership. But there are organizations, depending on what you're purchasing now. If you're, for instance, you're dealing in nuclear weapons or nuclear chemicals, whatever that you're doing, right? So they want to better have the contract control with legal, is because they find it they're the closest, or they might be. Procurement does not just have the KPI of managing contracts, right? For them, it's more so saving. There's a lot of other administrative tasks. So if they see those kind of situations, there are certain companies which have it with the legal team, even if it's a procurement contracts. There are a lot of tools which allow you both sales contracts, even the current procurement tools also have the option of having a sales contract as well as an internal contract and the procurement contract. Employee contracts, not so much, because that's very confidential. They don't want. So there is a way to either, usually it's with the human resources organization, right? If they're doing it through a procurement tool. Else, if you just have a pure CLM, contract lifecycle management tool, removing bidding, contracts, or even the sales order, everything apart, just the contract, then you have the case of the overall intercompany contracts, employee contracts, sales contract, procurement contract, all sitting in there. So there are a few tools, very good tools will do that as well, right? But I've got to just see a few of them. I just saw the demo of a few of them. They do wonders. And the plain old classic procurement contracts also, I've been very close to them over the years.
Okay, very interesting. So from the organizational structure, and I don't know, I mean, obviously each company is going to have different requirements of the legal team. Some companies are going to be very lean with respect to legal processes. But let's say if you are dealing with things like radioactive materials or the pharma, anything related to life science, they are going to have fairly legal requirements. So from the organization perspective, I'm pretty sure you are going to have the legal representation in your procurement function, legal representation in your HR function. So typically, the legal head who does it report to? I mean, do they report to the CEO, and then they are going to have some people underneath them? So how does the overall organizational structure looks?
Oh, legal is much like audit team or compliance team, where they have a head, the general counsel of the organization is the head of legal. That's how I've seen in most big organizations, where there is heavy chances of them being sued, right? So there they have a separate legal department. They usually don't roll into any other departments of procurement or finance. But there is a role within procurement called who are like not really lawyers, but their work is just doing contracts. They cannot. They've left their license to go and fight a case in the court. So they are like paralegal folks. So they are very strong on their contracts. They are kind of like assistants to the bigger lawyer or the legal team. So they work closely with the procurement team, like hand in hand, on the small contracts, like the contracts. Maybe they have a different threshold depending on the risk, and if it's like a $3 million contract or a $5 million contract, depending on the company, they can handle all the legal issues, right? And if there's something over that, they reach out to the legal team. So that also happens a lot. So they're also qualified. They few of them are qualified lawyers, but they have very strong legal background, and they help with even the sourcing folks in an RFP, where they go in case the supplier has a legal guy representing in the discussion. We have this person come in so that they can just cover. So we have that kind of a scenario as well in a lot of the large organizations, like an intermediary between the legal and procurement themselves.
So let's talk about the playbook, and you mentioned a couple of other things, such as having that one-directional non-disclosure agreement. And I don't know. So if I understand this right, you mentioned that your preferences are going to be to have the one-directional non-disclosure.
No, I always I'm a mutual guy. But few organizations have that. Like if you're Google, right, then you don't care. You are. It's like these big guys, Google or whatever the big companies. For instance, I have a policy as procurement that I use only my company paper logo with Procurement Doctor Consulting. And it's my right. But I can't do that with Google. They will say, shut up. Even though I am his customer, he will say, shut up. You have to sign in my paper, right? So this is somewhat that way as well. You first, if you have authority, you'll try to go one way confidentiality, right? Right. But many companies try that. For instance, they have a default payment terms of 120 days or 90 days. Right. Let the supplier come back and push. They have an insurance liability clause of $3 million. Right. So that even though I'm just one consultant trying to deploy a system, they want me to pay $1 million of insurance. They'll start with that just to see that they want to get maximum liability. Right? So that's what happens in a lot of those organizations out there.
So go ahead. Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I think you asked about the non-disclosure agreement, and then you asked about what was the one before that? You asked two questions. I forgot the first one.
So that was really related to the playbook, I guess.
The playbook. It ties back to the playbook. So the playbook right now, not many organizations use this SAP, and this playbook could be typically built in any of the good contract softwares that you have. It's a simple act. It's just you need to spend some time, dig deep, right, and fix it once and for all. And then you can go back every 2 years, and you could give the ownership to the legal team. They can keep updating it so that there's lesser of a hassle. Today, what happens is whenever I have a new contract, there's a new requisition that came in. They say, okay, this is over $100,000. We need to get into a contract. Now, what I as sourcing guy will do, I'll go check my old emails or my shared drive. Oh, this was the last time I used this contract. I'll just send it back, right? It may be a contract that had the worst of the language, or the clauses got changed by legal between then and now. Right? I haven't checked it. I thought last time he was okay. Why should he not have a problem now? I sent it. I put it in the RFP. The RFP went out. Supplier liked the contract. He told, okay, this is my pricing. Let's get into a contract. Now legal comes in. And legal looks, oh my God, why did you send this contract? It's the wrong one. Right? Now the cycle starts again. Now the supplier says, no, I don't agree with these clauses. And then it gets dragged for another 3-4 months. These are very simple things, but imagine how it got dragged. It's a waste of time. So these things could be tweaked in the early stages itself. For instance, if you have a platform, which is always having, it's the responsibility of legal to put the contracts at the latest and the greatest, and you just pick it from there and send it to the supplier. That's it, to the system itself, as opposed to doing it offline or whatever. Then it creates this kind of complication.
Okay, so I am still trying to, understand the playbook. So one thing that I could follow so far based on the conversation is the 70% is going to be sort of the standard across the categories when you look at these contracts. So you are trying to standardize all of those, and you are probably trying to standardize some of the language element, the syntax, or the way you are going to structure your contract, right? But you are probably not always going to have the clout in getting the agreement on the boilerplate contract, the 70% of the language that you are going to have. Because, if you are going to be working with the authoritative either vendor or the customer, they are going to say that, I'm not going to accept this. I'm actually going to redline everything, and I want you to go with a different format. So when you say 70%, is it like you are trying to standardize that as much as possible so that you don't actually make the mistakes in sending the wrong contract?
That's right.
But if there are going to be changes, then you can accept those, right?
That's right. So let me give it a stab once more, man.
Yeah.
So 70% when I said is, if you are one lawyer, we have three lawyers, right? And they have three different styles of working.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is we could basically bring 70% of the contract could be the same amongst the three lawyers.
Yeah.
So you don't need to change every word every time. That's one aspect, which is internal.
Yeah.
Right. Now, from the language perspective itself, what happens today is you send the boilerplate contract to the supplier. Right?
Yeah.
If he accepts, you're good. No need to involve legal. Right. If he changes even one sentence, it has to go to legal. That's how a lot of the companies operate today.
Yep.
Okay. Now, what I'm doing is, you send the boilerplate contract, which is approved by legal itself.
Yeah.
Supplier, it went to the supplier or your client or whoever. He made a few changes. Now it comes back to you. You as strategic sourcing guy, you're not the legal, yes. You're the strategic sourcing guy, procurement guy, or whoever, the sales guy, whatever.
Yeah.
Now you look at the clause. You have a playbook given by the legal type. They're saying that if it smells like this, it looks like this, right?
Yeah.
And it's this size.
Yeah.
I'm okay with it.
Right.
So you accept it, or you would say, okay, you can change this clause to this, which I've given another variation of the clause, which is a little more subtle.
Yeah.
So what the buyer or whoever the sourcing guy needs to do is he'll just switch that clause and he'll send it back to the supplier.
Yeah.
You don't need to involve legal here.
Yeah.
Supplier says, okay, Karthik, I am good with this. You're done deal. But now supplier again comes back and says, no, I still don't agree with this. I want my clause. Then you involve legal.
Yeah. Yeah.
You kind of taking care of those initial steps, which is what the playbook is doing, right? We don't want the sourcing guy who doesn't have legal background to do a big blunder.
Yeah.
So we are gathering some of that knowledge, whatever the legal team has. We standardize it. We have a few standard clauses or fallback clauses to the standard, or first the boilerplate, then there's two fallback, and then the third time you involve the legal team. And this doesn't happen for every clause. Certain clauses, it has to go directly to legal. But you try to avoid that interaction with legal as much as possible, is because we know that they're expensive, they're very busy, right? And it's a better way of working for the sourcing team as well, because they're managing the relationship more so than legal. So that's the overall concept around the playbook as such.
Yeah, that's great. So obviously, as you are going to grow, I think the playbook is going to be incorporated in some sort of tool, because that's actually going to make everybody's life easier, right? Mm-hmm. So we also wanted to touch on how typically SMB or the small to medium sized businesses, especially when we talk about manufacturing organization or distribution organization, they are going to be very inventory heavy. And when you are inventory heavy, you are going to be signing a lot of contracts. Sometimes they could be blanket contracts because you don't want to be signing at each purchase, right? Mm-hmm. So what are some of the pitfalls that you have seen, let's say in the SMB space, when you look at the contract management processes, and some of the challenges that you have come across that could result in either losing significant money or losing significant time from the internal team perspective? So what are some of the process loopholes that you have seen in the SMB space that, let's say, if they hired you as a consultant, that you would definitely like to fix immediately? Yeah.
So firstly, I would, Sam, try to understand what I've seen SMBs do is either they overdo or they don't do.
Yeah.
On the contract side, either they'll overdo it or they'll not do it at all.
Yeah.
So that's the two extreme variations I've seen. And I think it's best to do it the right amount.
Yeah.
Right. Whether you don't need to have a tool, even if I've seen few organizations who manage the contracts in such a wonderful way, even though they're SMBs, right, the small guys or whatever, but they know exactly which contract is expiring when.
Yeah.
And you should be happy that you don't have like 15,000 contracts to manage.
Yeah.
It's still a smaller number. You won't get into a contract with every supplier. If it's a small value, you might not get into it. So it must be the medium and high or high risk kind of suppliers. So the pitfalls that I've seen is, to some extent, you should have it a little centralized. The contract repository where the contracts are sitting, is there a retention policy?
Yeah.
You have to have, it's better if you have one legal guy, right? Try to ensure that you don't kill him with so many requests, right? So you need to pick up some other slack to understand the legal side of things, but be a little supportive, right?
Yeah.
If you have external counsel, few people don't even have a legal team. So imagine every time you send him a meeting invite, your bill is ticking. So you need to be even more cautious that you don't go to him for silly reasons, because that will be extra money for your organization. And contracts are the bloodline to your organization for me to some extent, is because it's not just handling the commercial aspects. It could help you in the court as well. And we know how we get sued for, it could be the minutest of things that you thought you are covered. We didn't do anything bad, but you could be pulled to court and it could be potentially bankruptcy for your company. So you have to stay close to them. Whether it's your shared drive, whether it's there are a lot of free contract management tools as well, where you can store. There's free sales systems which allow you to also store your contracts. You don't need to pay there. So you can start managing the contracts, folder structure, ownership, expiration date, notifications, what are the key clauses that got changed. There's this other thing, another story, like I'm just jumping in here, Sam, before I forget that. There's this thing called contract abstract document.
Okay.
You know what an abstract is, right? Abstract is like an executive summary. It's good to at least keep them for your most critical high risk contracts. Is because your senior leadership, he doesn't need to go through the 252-page document. There's one page which is talking about the key clauses, and that gives you a good view. And it's good to maintain something like that at an early stage. It's because as you scale, it's easier for you to understand and grow exponentially. And don't shy away from changing. It's because you think that you've done something in a particular way, and that's what I was arguing with my son. He told, like, I did that 4 times. It should be right. I told, bloody 4 times you did it wrong. 5th time doesn't make it right. So don't get into that rabbit hole as well. In terms of your contract management.
So when we look at, and especially since you mentioned that if you do it 4 times, and that is not the guarantee that the 5th time it's going to be right. And that's where I like to think that even if you are going to set up the framework or the playbook, but the playbook does not guarantee success, because the compliance piece is always going to be there. And when you have 4 or 5 people in the organization that is actually touching the contract, or if they are dealing with the contract, they all are going to have their own styles of working. So for the compliance, you need some sort of tool. So now, obviously, when we look at the SMB, they think of the contract, they are probably going to think about DocuSign. They are going to think that, I have DocuSign. I can probably have all of my contracts there. I can have all of my payload there. But as you correctly pointed out, when you are going to have, let's say, the ERP system is going to have its own functionality. They don't really do a good job of, they might store the contract, but let's say if you need to track the expiration date, I don't know how many ERP systems are going to do really good job of tracking the expiration date, tracking your quoting process. So from your experience, let's say if you have these multiple tools, we have to also think about how we are going to be integrating those, because if they are not integrated, then obviously you are going to run into a lot of issues, because your vendors are going to be different in each of those systems. So from your experience, let's say if you were to create the ideal architecture at each stage of the company. So let's say if we are talking about, $5 million, $10 million, $15 million, $50 million, $100 million, so how the tool set, the playbook, and the architecture is going to evolve. Can you touch on that?
So I'll get a little technical on this side. Okay? What happens is the different variations of contract, like you kept increasing the value, right? I wish I have $100 million contract to sign sometime in the future. But so what happens typically is the PO is kind of a contract. Right. The purchase order is a contract. So you utilize that as a contract because it's got its terms and conditions. Every company, depending on whether you're purchasing something risky or value, the PO is not only required, but you also need a contract.
Yeah.
Right. So that's how it keeps moving up and up.
Yeah.
Now, the contracts, the way it touches throughout your organization, I'm coming back to you from the procurement side of things itself.
Yeah.
Okay. Technologically, what happens? Let's say there's an ERP, there's a software as a service tool in the front end, which is managing the contracts.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a transactional agreement, right?
Yeah.
Which is per the line item, whatever purchase that you're doing in that contract. Let's say we're buying 10 pens, 10 glass sets or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So this is tied to a contract.
Yeah.
Now, what the requisition got raised. So there's two ways. One is before the requisition gets raised, the contract has to be signed if it's radioactive waste.
Yeah.
Because you can't just request for it and then, because I'll tell you what, I cut a cake on the signature of a contract, Sam, once. Yeah. You can imagine why did we cut the cake? Because it took 2.5 years to sign the contract.
Oh, wow.
It's because it was radioactive waste, and the legal guys got left the company from the supplier side, from the buyer side.
Yeah.
That's the amount of negotiation that's happening, because it's so critical, right? So that's what I'm saying. So in that scenario, the contract doesn't get created after creating the requisition. Right. You want to first have the contract, and then anything else will happen, because you don't want to have pressure. Else the business will sit behind you saying that, where's the contract? I need to have the work done. Yeah. Right. Certain categories that happens. So certain categories, the requisition is a trigger to create the contract depending on the threshold. Yeah. Now the requisition got created. It got now you see that this is a big purchase. You might want to run an RFQ or an RFX. Okay. So you send it to through integration, whatever lines got created by the end user saying that I need 10 pencils and this and this. Yeah. That goes out to your front end system. Yeah. It pre-populates the kind of whatever items that you want to buy on the event, right? Yeah. You run the event, you have 6 suppliers, right? If you see that this contract is complicated, most suppliers will push it back. So you want to cut down the lead time. Okay. What you do is you add the contract in the RFP itself. Okay. As a prerequisite for the supplier to accept. Okay. Because you don't want to increase the lead time later. After he's confirmed that I'll give this pens for $3 each. Yeah. Now, and then I say, okay, let's sign a contract. Now he says, no, I don't like your contract. And then it's done, right? Yeah. So we want to give them a preview that this is how the contract's going to look like. If you don't like it, get out right now. Yeah. Yeah. We will not select you, right? Yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of another trick that I've seen over the years. And then it's finalized. Now you sign the contract, you awarded the bid. Once you award the bid, now depending on whether it's a blanket, outline, whatever, in whatever language, right? So line items go ahead and it updates the PO, then the ERP, whether it's release orders, whatever in Oracle, SAP, there's different ways of doing it. Yeah. So it gets tied that way. In this, there could be one small change in scenario as well. So this pen could be a catalog as well. Yeah. Right. So the catalog could be sitting in your front end system, and that price automatically gets updated. Assuming more so everyone uses an internal catalog, very few use an external where the supplier is maintaining the data, the pricing the data. So this is an internal catalog where you as an organization have negotiated a deal with good prices. Yeah. That contract price will go ahead and update in that particular screen. Yeah. And I as an end user can just go and buy 3 pens out of it. Yeah. Yeah. So that's the overall gamut that you can look at in terms of the end-to-end contract cycle as such. Okay, amazing, Karthik. So that's it for today. Do you have any last-minute closing thoughts or remark for our listeners? Well, I'm so happy to come on your show, man. I see you every day with someone new or the other. So hats off to your work, right? And it's a pleasure. I know there are a few guys from the procurement side, a few guys from the contract side who came on WBS. It's an honor to come on as a guest, right? I'll be glad to come back on anytime in the future, whenever you think it makes sense for me to come back. Okay, amazing, Karthik. And my personal takeaway from this conversation is going to be that you need to take your contract management slightly seriously, because obviously there are going to be a lot of efficiencies that you can gain by managing and streamlining your contract process, and you can save a lot of trouble for yourself in the future if you sign an incorrect contract that you might not have visibility on as of today. On that note, Karthik, I really want to thank you for your time. One last point is contract management has always been given the stepchild-like treatment within procurement or overall thing, is because there's so much about money saving, and then they don't execute it to the contract. So that's the thing. So give it a little more respect or meaning as it's supposed to be given. Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for your time and insight, Karthik. I really enjoyed this episode.
I cannot thank our guests enough for coming on the show, for sharing their knowledge and journey. I always pick up learnings from our guests, and hopefully you learned something new today. If you want to learn more about Karthik, follow Procurement Doctor on LinkedIn and Twitter. Links and more information will also be available in the show notes. If anything in this podcast resonated with you and your business, you might want to check other related episodes, including the interview with Angela Furman, who discusses the process for supplier capacity and quality planning. Also, the interview with Christine Von Pender, who discusses the procurement process for food packaging equipment. Also, don't forget to subscribe and spread the word among folks with similar backgrounds. If you have any questions or comments about the show, please review and rate us on your favorite podcasting platform or DM me on any social channels. I'll try my best to respond personally and make sure you get help. Thank you, and I hope to catch you on the next episode of the WBS Podcast.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.